In this video, I'll show you how I'd like you to draw larger-than-life facial features. One way to do it is to have a hand mirror, and another way is to use a tablet. We'll start right off with a video that's sped up 4 times life speed. I'll begin with an ear because I think it's abstract and it's pretty easy to just put some values down. Draw with vine charcoal, and you'll see I actually hold the charcoal quite a ways back from the tip. I'm trying to be very delicate and very precise, and then later I'll go back and make the dark values. Make your features larger than the span of your hand. It's important that you draw large and gesturally. This will help when we get to drawing your self-portrait later to keep yourself from tightening up. You want to draw in a relaxed fashion, even when you draw the same features at a smaller scale later on. It will help if you have strong shadows in your reference photos, if that's what you're using, or to have a very direct light if you're looking into a mirror. Although I start off with lines, I'm really trying to render three-dimensional space on the flat picture plane, the piece of paper. I don't use a stump very much in this drawing, I just use my fingertips. And I guess that's just the quickest way for me to make the values move around where I want them. In a longer term drawing, it's better to use a paper stump or something else so you don't rub oil from your hands onto the paper. Here I'm beginning to draw a nose and mouth using just the charcoal that's on a cotton ball, and then I have a sense of where the forms are going to end up on the paper. You can draw the nose and mouth separately. They just seem to go together to me. The space between the bottom of your nose and the top of your mouth is one of the hardest things to get right in your self-portrait drawing, so I'm practicing that here. After I establish value with the vine charcoal, I go back and smear the value around and then go back again and make it darker. This is the same process I used in my still life drawings. Don't hesitate to go straight to the darkest value you can get out of the vine charcoal. It's possible to lighten it again, so make the contrast as strong as you can get it. If you do choose to make a more delicate high-key drawing later, this is good practice. I find it really helpful to establish profiles and contours outside of the features so that it locates where they are on the face. I'm trying to keep the proportions correct, but I'm not worrying about making everything absolutely perfect. The main idea here is for you to make the features look like they're fully three-dimensional. I've slowed the video back down again just to show you how fast I'm really drawing while I'm doing all this work. And here I'm going back in with the eraser and again pulling out some highlights. I draw with the eraser almost as much as I draw with the charcoal sometimes. Think about these drawings as sculpting the shapes with light on the piece of paper. Try and make them as fully round, as fully three-dimensional as you can. Don't just make a bunch of lines on the paper. Try and establish qualities that will allow the features to read as three-dimensional. Here's a reference photo of my son, and I took the picture with strong side lighting. This is another technique for laying out your drawing. I'm actually using a paintbrush that I'm dipping into graphite powder that's stuck on my piece of sandpaper. This works about the same as the cotton ball. And then I'll go straight into vine charcoal and start to draw light areas and light lines to map out the space. Remember that I'm expecting you to spend a couple of hours making these drawings at least, so watching the sped up video is very deceptive. It took me a couple of hours to make the drawings that you're looking at. Drawing this large, it's pretty easy to have things in the wrong place on the piece of paper. So as you watch me draw, you'll see that as I blend, I also move the contours. I move where things are. For example, the edge of the hair here is going to move several times, and it gets closer to where the corner of the eye is as I go. I just drew a little box on both of the eyes. That's going to be the catch light, or the highlight reflection of light on the eyeball. Notice that I go back and forth. I don't just draw one eye and then draw another. You have to draw the whole drawing at once. I'm really only going to finish the eye that's on the left-hand side, just so you can see the contrast between them. Between a drawing which is a bunch of lines, in a drawing where the eye is rounded so that it is convincing and so it looks three-dimensional on the piece of paper. Again, this whole drawing is done with vine charcoal. At the very end, I'll grab a charcoal pencil to do some details around the eye. The edge of the shadow from the nose is really an important part of this drawing. It's very important to draw what you see rather than what you think you're supposed to draw. For example, the corner of the eye is actually in shadow, so I had to make that whole side of the eye quite dark. It is what I see. It isn't what I think it's supposed to look like. I'm using a very small eraser to pull back some highlights on the edges of the eyelids. And of course we've switched back to real time and the charcoal pencil. Selectively adding detail is more important than adding detail everywhere on your drawing. Where you have the most detail is where the viewer's eye is going to be drawn to. So by selecting where I'm going to make detail and how much detail there is, I'm setting the terms of how a viewer will see my drawing. If I were drawing with a pencil, I would be tempted to draw this eye for about the next hour. One of the reasons why I'm using charcoal and recommend you use charcoal is just to graphically get right in there and establish values as quick as you can. You can work on details when you work on your self-portrait later in the semester. These areas of shadow that I'm adding around the eye are making it look as if the skin is over a round object. And the eyeball on the other side doesn't have this treatment yet. That's why it looks a little bit odd still. And I left the contrast on purpose. One side is a three-dimensional eye, and the other side is a bunch of lines on the paper. Some artists think that this is a good way to learn how to draw features by drawing them one at a time in isolation. Our next project with the self-portrait is going to be to figure out proportions and how to get the features in the right place and the right size on the drawing. So enjoy this process. The next step is a little bit more complicated, I think. I have enjoyed this process again. This is a creepy drawing, I guess, with just two eyeballs staring out at you. But the idea is that this is going to go someplace in a couple of weeks. So do this as relaxed fashion as you can. You're experimenting. You don't have to make anything that's perfect. You can definitely see that one side is flat and the other side reads as three-dimensional.